The rain fell hard on the stone steps of Asheford Manor. As Lady Eleanor Heartbreak stood before the massive oak doors, she swore she would never see again. Her hands trembled as she gripped her traveling cloak tighter around her shoulders. 7 years had passed since she last stood on this ground. 7 years since the worst day of her life had begun in the chapel just beyond those doors. The door opened, and a young servant girl appeared with wide eyes. She curtsied quickly and stepped aside without a word. Eleanor walked into the grand entrance hall, and memories crashed over her like violent waves. She remembered walking through these same halls, with hope in her heart and flowers in her hair. She remembered the guests filling every room with laughter and music. She remembered standing alone in her wedding gown, while whispers spread through the chapel like poison. He never came. Duke William Ashford had left her at the altar without explanation or apology. One moment she was a bride waiting to begin her life, and the next, she was a spectacle of pity and shame. The entire county had watched her humiliation. Her father had died 6 months later, and everyone said it was heartbreak that killed him. Eleanor had taken what little inheritance remained and disappeared to the countryside, where no one knew her story. Now the butler appeared, and his old face showed surprise when he recognized her. His name was Thomas, and he had always been kind to her during her brief engagement to William. "Lady Eleanor," Thomas said with a bow that seemed heavier than it should be, "so His Grace is waiting for you in the library." Her heart pounded against her ribs like a prisoner demanding freedom. She wanted to turn and run back to her quiet life, where William Ashford was nothing but a bitter memory. But the letter in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The letter that had arrived 3 days ago, written in his own hand. She followed Thomas through hallways that felt both familiar and foreign. The paintings on the walls were darker than she remembered. The carpets were worn. The whole manor felt like it was holding its breath and waiting for something to break. Thomas opened the library door, and there he was. William stood by the window with his back to her, and for a moment time collapsed. He looked the same with his broad shoulders and dark hair that always fell slightly too long at his collar. But when he turned to face her, she saw that everything had changed. His face was thinner, and lines of worry cut deep around his eyes and mouth. He looked like a man who had not slept properly in months. "Eleanor," he said, and her name on his lips made her chest ache with old wounds. She lifted her chin and met his eyes with all the strength she had built over 7 years of surviving without him. "Your Grace," she said coldly, "your letter said you needed my help urgently. I am here only because you claimed it was a matter of life and death." Something flickered across his face that might have been pain or regret. He gestured to a chair, but she remained standing. She would not sit comfortably in his home, as if they were old friends sharing tea. William ran a hand through his hair, in a gesture she remembered too well. "Thank you for coming. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I did." "You have less than no right," Eleanor said, and her voice was steady even though her heart was breaking all over again. "You destroyed my life and my family. If your letter had not mentioned that lives were at stake, I would have burned it without reading past your name." He flinched, but nodded. "I deserve that, and far worse. But Eleanor, the situation is desperate. The estate is failing. The tenants are suffering. There is a blight affecting the crops that no one can stop, and the livestock are dying. We have lost 3 tenant families already, and more will leave before winter if we cannot find a solution." Eleanor felt a flicker of concern despite herself. She had grown up in this county, and many of those tenant families had been her neighbors and friends. "What does this have to do with me?" William met her eyes, and she saw something in them she had never seen before. Fear. You are the only person who can help. Your work in agricultural reform has become famous even if you publish under a different name. I know it is you. I have followed every paper and every innovation you have brought to the northern farms. You have saved 3 estates from ruin in the past 5 years. You understand soil and crops and livestock in ways that no one else does. She stared at him in shock. She had been so careful to keep her identity hidden when she published her research and methods. After the scandal of being left at the altar, she had wanted to build something that belonged only to her. Something that had nothing to do with William Ashford or the life she had lost. "How did you know?" she asked. "I have always known you, Eleanor," he said quietly. "I know how your mind works. I know your handwriting even when you try to disguise it. I know the way you see problems that others miss. When I read the first paper about crop rotation patterns, I knew it was you." Anger flared hot in her chest. "You have no right to claim you know me. You left me standing in a church in front of everyone I loved without even the courtesy of an explanation. You disappeared for weeks while I suffered the gossip and the shame. You broke me." "I know," William said, and his voice cracked. "I know what I did, and I have lived with it every day since. But right now, there are children going hungry because the fields are failing. There are families who will lose everything if we cannot save the harvest. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking for anything for myself. I am begging you to help them." Eleanor turned away from him and walked to the window. Below, she could see the grounds of Asheford Manor stretching toward the tenant farms in the distance. She remembered playing in those fields as a girl. She remembered the harvest festivals and the way the whole community would come together to celebrate. The thought of those families suffering made her heart hurt, but the thought of helping William made her feel like she was betraying herself. "Why should I believe you care about those families?" she asked without looking at him. "You did not care about me. You did not care about the promises you made or the life we were supposed to build. Why should I believe this is anything more than you trying to save your own wealth and reputation?" She heard him move closer, but he did not touch her. "Because you know me too, Eleanor. Whatever else I am, and whatever terrible things I have done, you know I have always cared about the people on this land. My father taught me that our title means nothing if we do not serve those who depend on us. That is the one thing I have never betrayed." Eleanor closed her eyes. She hated that he was right. Even in the midst of her anger and hurt, she remembered how William had always been kind to the tenants, how he had paid for medicine when families were sick, and how he had personally helped repair cottages damaged in storms. Whatever had made him abandon her at the altar, it had not been cruelty to the innocent. She turned to face him again. "If I agree to help, I am doing it for them. Not for you. You will give me complete control over all decisions regarding the land and the crops. You will not question my methods or my judgment. And when this is over, I will leave, and you will never contact me again." William nodded immediately. "Whatever you want. Whatever you need. Just please help us." Eleanor took a deep breath and felt the weight of her decision settle over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She was walking back into the place that had destroyed her. She was agreeing to work beside the man who had shattered her heart into pieces so small she thought they could never be put back together. But those families needed her, and she had never been able to turn away from people who were suffering. "I will need to inspect the fields tomorrow at first light," she said. "I will need access to all records of crops planted for the past 5 years and detailed accounts of when the problems began. I will need to speak with the tenants directly, without you present, because they need to trust me." "Done," William said. "All of it. Thank you, Eleanor. You cannot know what this means." She looked at him with eyes that had learned how to guard her heart. "You are right. You cannot know what this means to me either. Now show me to my room. I want to be alone." As Thomas led her up the stairs to a guest room far from the ducal chambers, Eleanor wondered what she had just agreed to. She was back in Asheford Manor. She was back in William's life. And despite every wall she had built around her heart, she could feel old feelings stirring like ghosts that refused to stay buried. But this was either the bravest thing she had ever done or the biggest mistake of her life. She had a terrible feeling it might be both. Eleanor woke before dawn, with her mind already racing through everything she needed to do. She dressed in her practical work clothes and sturdy boots that she had brought from her northern estate. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was different from the young bride who had once prepared to marry in this house. That girl had been soft and trusting. The woman she had become was harder and knew that survival meant never giving anyone the power to hurt her again. She made her way downstairs and found Thomas waiting with a basket of bread and cheese for her breakfast. He smiled gently and told her that a horse was already saddled and waiting. Eleanor wondered if William had given orders, or if Thomas simply remembered how much she hated waiting around when there was work to be done. The morning air was cold and damp as she rode out toward the tenant farms. The land looked worse than she had imagined from William's description. The fields that should have been green with healthy crops were patchy and yellow. In some areas, the plants had withered completely and left nothing but bare dirt. She could see the blight spreading like a disease across what had once been the most productive farmland in the county. She stopped at the first cottage and knocked. A woman answered with a baby on her hip and 2 small children clinging to her skirts. The woman's face was thin, and worry had carved deep lines around her eyes. When Eleanor introduced herself, the woman's expression changed from suspicion to something like desperate hope. "You are the Lady Eleanor," the woman said. "The one who was supposed to marry His Grace all those years ago." Eleanor felt the familiar sting of that old shame, but she pushed it down. "I am. But I am here now because I know how to fix sick land. May I ask you some questions about when the problem started?" The woman invited her inside, and over weak tea, she told Eleanor everything. The blight had started 2 years ago in the eastern fields, and had spread slowly at first. By last harvest, it had consumed nearly half of all the crops. The animals that grazed on the affected fields had started getting sick. 3 cows had died just last month. The woman's husband had gone to the Duke many times asking for help, but nothing had worked. Eleanor asked careful questions about what had been planted and when. She asked about the water sources and the weather patterns. She asked about what fertilizers had been used and whether anything had changed in how the land was managed. The woman answered everything as best she could, but Eleanor could see the fear in her eyes. This family was 1 bad season away from losing everything. She visited 6 more families that morning, and the story was the same everywhere. Good people were watching their lives fall apart, and they did not understand why. By midday, Eleanor had filled 3 pages in her notebook with observations, and her mind was already forming theories about what might be causing the blight. She was examining the soil in the eastern field when she heard a horse approaching. She knew without looking that it was William. Some part of her that she hated could still sense his presence, like her body remembered him, even though her mind had tried to forget. He dismounted and walked toward her, but kept a respectful distance. "What have you found?" Eleanor did not look up from the soil sample she was studying. "The problem is not a natural blight. This is soil exhaustion combined with water contamination. Someone has been planting the same crops in the same fields year after year without proper rotation. The soil has lost all its nutrients. Worse, I think there is runoff from somewhere that is poisoning the water table." William was quiet for a moment. My estate manager assured me he was following best practices. "Your estate manager is either incompetent or lying," Eleanor said flatly. She finally looked up at him and saw shame on his face. Where is he now? I dismissed him 3 months ago when I realized how bad things had become. I have been trying to manage everything myself, but I do not have your knowledge. Eleanor stood and brushed the dirt from her hands. Take me to wherever waste from the manor is disposed. Animal waste, kitchen refuse, everything. William looked confused, but he nodded and led her on horseback toward the northern edge of the property. What she found there made her stomach turn. There was a massive pit where waste had been dumped for years. It sat on a hill directly above the water source that fed into the streams running through all the tenant farms. "Ah, dear God," Eleanor whispered. "Every time it rains, this filth washes down into the water that irrigates your fields and that your tenants drink. You have been poisoning your own land." William's face went pale. "I did not know. My father set up this waste system decades ago. I never thought to question it." Eleanor felt anger rise in her throat. "You never thought to question it? You are responsible for these people and this land. How could you not know what was happening?" "Because I have been barely holding on," William said, and his voice was raw with emotion. "Because after I left you at that altar, everything in my life fell apart. And I have been trying to keep my head above water ever since. I know that is no excuse. I know I have failed everyone, including you, especially you. But I am trying to make it right now." She wanted to stay angry, but something in his voice made her pause. This was not the confident Duke she remembered. This was a broken man who was drowning in responsibilities he could not handle alone. "Why did you leave me?" The question came out before she could stop it. "After all these years, I deserve to know why you destroyed us." William looked at her, and she saw pain so deep in his eyes that it almost made her look away. "The morning of our wedding, I received a letter. It said that my younger sister Charlotte had been kidnapped. The letter said, if I went through with the wedding, she would be killed. It said I had to leave immediately and come alone, or she would die. It said if I told anyone, including you, they would know, and she would pay the price." Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Charlotte. But she is alive. She lives in London." "She does now," William said, "because I spent 3 weeks tracking down the men who took her. Because I paid a ransom that nearly bankrupted the estate. Because I did terrible things to get her back safely. By the time I returned with her, you were gone. Your father refused to see me. You had left the county and no one would tell me where you went. I sent letters, but they all came back unopened." Eleanor's mind was reeling. "Why did you not tell me this before? Why did you let me believe you simply abandoned me because you did not want to marry me?" "Because the men who took Charlotte were never caught. Because I received another letter a month after I brought her home that said if I ever revealed what happened, they would come back and finish what they started. Because I was terrified that connecting you to me would put you in danger. I thought you hating me was better than you being hurt because of me." Tears burned in Eleanor's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You made that choice for me. You decided what I could handle and what I deserved to know. You let me suffer and grieve and rebuild my entire life based on a lie." "I know," William said, and his own eyes were wet. "I have regretted it every single day. I thought I was protecting you, but I realize now that I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing Charlotte that I lost you instead. I lost everything that mattered." Eleanor turned away from him because looking at his face was too painful. 7 years of anger and hurt were crashing against this new information, and she did not know what to feel. Part of her wanted to scream at him for making such a terrible choice. Part of her understood the impossible situation he had been in. Part of her just wanted to weep for the life they had lost. "I need time," she said quietly. "I need to think about all of this. Right now, I have work to do." She walked back toward her horse, but William called after her. "Eleanor, wait. There is something else you need to know." She stopped, but did not turn around. "The blight is not an accident," William said. 2 weeks ago I received another letter. It was from the same people who took Charlotte. They said they have been sabotaging the estate for years. They said this is punishment for something my father did before he died. They want to destroy everything the Asheford family has built." Eleanor spun to face him. "You think someone deliberately contaminated the water and ruined the soil?" "I do not know for certain, but the timing is too perfect. Everything started falling apart right after my father died, and I inherited. Someone wants to see me fail. Someone wants to see these people suffer." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. "Have you told anyone? Have you gone to the authorities?" "And tell them what? That I received threatening letters from people I cannot identify about crimes I cannot prove. They would think I was making excuses for my own poor management. I have no evidence. I only have my suspicions and the word of criminals." Eleanor's practical mind was already working through the implications. If William was right, then fixing the land was only part of the problem. They also had to find whoever was behind the attacks and stop them before they struck again. "We need to set a trap," she said slowly. "We need to make it look like the estate is recovering, so they will be forced to act again. And when they do, we will be ready." William looked at her with surprise. "We? You are willing to help me even after everything I just told you?" Eleanor met his eyes and felt the familiar pull of the connection they had once shared. She was still angry. She was still hurt. But she could not walk away from people who needed her, and she could not ignore the possibility that innocent families were being used as pawns in someone's revenge. "I am helping the tenants," she said firmly. "If stopping whoever is behind this helps them, then that is what I will do. But William, when this is over, we need to have a real conversation about what happened between us. No more secrets, no more lies. I deserve the whole truth." "You will have it," William promised. "Whatever you want to know, I will tell you. I owe you that and so much more." As Eleanor rode back toward the manor, her heart was a confused tangle of emotions. She had come here expecting to face the man who betrayed her. Instead, she had found a mystery that threatened innocent lives and a truth that changed everything she thought she knew about the worst day of her life. The question now was whether knowing the truth would heal the wounds of the past or just open them wider, and whether working alongside William to save his estate would bring them closer together or remind her exactly why she had spent 7 years learning to live without him. Either way, there was no turning back now. She was committed to seeing this through, no matter where it led or what it cost her heart. 3 weeks passed in a blur of back-breaking work and careful planning. Eleanor threw herself into saving the estate with the same fierce determination that had built her reputation in the northern counties. She supervised the construction of a new waste management system that diverted all runoff away from the water sources. She brought in fresh soil and implemented a strict crop rotation schedule that would slowly restore nutrients to the exhausted fields. She met with every tenant family personally and gave them hope that their lives could be saved. And through it all, William worked beside her. He dug ditches alongside the farmhands and carried heavy bags of seed without complaint. He listened to her instructions without question and never once challenged her authority. Eleanor watched him interact with the tenants and saw genuine care in every conversation. These were not the actions of a man who only cared about wealth and reputation. This was a man trying desperately to make amends for failures that had haunted him, but they still had not caught whoever was sabotaging the estate. Eleanor had set up her trap carefully. She made sure word spread through the county that the land was recovering, and that the Duke had found a miracle solution to save the farms. She knew that if someone was truly trying to destroy the Asheford estate, they would not let this success stand unchallenged. She was right. It happened on a cold night when Eleanor could not sleep. She had been reviewing her notes in the library when she heard sounds coming from outside near the stables. Every instinct told her something was wrong. She grabbed a lantern and went to investigate without thinking about the danger. What she found made her blood run cold. A man she did not recognize was pouring something into the water trough that fed the livestock. While even in the dim light she could see it was some kind of poison. He was so focused on his task that he did not hear her approach. "Stop right there," Eleanor said, with a voice that shook despite her attempt to sound brave. The man spun around and his eyes went wide with panic. He was young, maybe 20 years old, and he looked terrified. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then he dropped the bottle he was holding and ran. Eleanor chased after him without thinking. She was fast, but he was faster and desperate. He was heading toward the woods where he could disappear into the darkness. She knew if he escaped, they would never find out who sent him or why. Suddenly, William appeared from the shadows and tackled the man to the ground. They struggled violently, but William was stronger, and within moments, he had the man pinned down. For 2 groundskeepers that William had stationed as lookouts came running with ropes to tie the intruder up. William looked at Eleanor with concern written all over his face. "Are you hurt? What were you thinking chasing him alone?" "I was thinking we needed answers," Eleanor said breathlessly. "He was poisoning the water for the animals." They dragged the young man into the stables and lit more lanterns. Up close, Eleanor could see he was just a boy, really. Barely more than a teenager. He was shaking with fear and would not meet their eyes. William crouched down to his level. "Who sent you? Why are you doing this?" The boy said nothing. He just stared at the ground with his jaw clenched tight. Eleanor had an idea. She knelt beside him and spoke gently. "You are very young. I do not think you are doing this because you want to hurt people. I think someone is forcing you or paying you. If you tell us the truth, we can help you. But if you stay silent, you will take all the blame for everything that has happened here." The boy's eyes flickered up to meet hers, and she saw tears forming. "He said he would hurt my mother. He said if I did not do what he wanted, she would lose her job, and we would be thrown out of our cottage." "Who said that?" William asked urgently. The boy hesitated, then whispered a name that made William's face go white with shock. "Mr. Gerald Blackwood." Eleanor looked at William with confusion. "Who is Gerald Blackwood?" William stood up slowly, and she could see rage building in his expression. "He was my father's business partner. They had a falling out years ago over some investment that went bad. My father blamed Gerald for losing money and ended their partnership publicly. It ruined Gerald's reputation. I thought he had moved away and started over somewhere else." "He did move away," the boy said quietly. "But he never forgot what your father did to him. He has been planning this revenge for years. He paid people to sabotage your fields and poison your water. He wanted to destroy everything your family built, just like your father destroyed him." William ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Where is he now? Where can we find him?" The boy gave them an address in the neighboring county. William immediately sent one of the groundskeepers to fetch the local magistrate, while he locked the boy in a storage room. Then he turned to Eleanor, with determination burning in his eyes. "I'm going after him tonight, but he has hurt too many people, and I will not let him escape." "Then I am coming with you," Eleanor said firmly. "Absolutely not. This could be dangerous. I did not come all this way and work this hard to let you face this alone," Eleanor said. "We are in this together, whether you like it or not." William looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. He nodded once, and they rode out together into the night, with 2 armed groundskeepers following behind them. They found Gerald Blackwood in a shabby house on the outskirts of town. He was a bitter old man with hatred etched into every line of his face. When William confronted him with the evidence and the boy's confession, Gerald laughed coldly. "Your father took everything from me," Gerald spat. "He deserved to see his precious legacy crumble. You deserve to suffer like I suffered." "My father made mistakes," William said quietly. "But these tenant families did nothing to you. Those children going hungry did nothing to you. You punished innocent people for a grudge that had nothing to do with them." The magistrate arrived shortly after and took Gerald Blackwood into custody. The evidence was overwhelming, and the boy's testimony would seal his fate. It was over. The threat that had hung over Asheford Manor for years was finally ended. As they rode back toward the estate, the sun was beginning to rise. Eleanor felt exhaustion settling into her bones, but also something else. Relief. Peace. A sense that something broken was finally being mended. When they reached the manor, William helped her down from her horse. His hands lingered on her waist, and she did not pull away. They stood there in the early morning light just looking at each other. "Thank you," William said softly. "For everything. For coming when I needed you. For saving the estate and the families. For being brave enough to chase down a criminal in the dark. For giving me a chance to explain what happened all those years ago." Eleanor felt tears forming, but this time she let them fall. "I spent 7 years hating you. 7 years building walls around my heart, so I would never hurt like that again. But these past few weeks working beside you and seeing who you really are, those walls have started crumbling down." William reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "I do not deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But Eleanor, I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought I had lost you forever, you were always in my heart. You were the reason I kept fighting to save this place, because I knew if I failed completely, I would never have even the smallest chance of seeing you again. I never stopped loving you either," Eleanor whispered. I tried so hard to forget you and move on. But my heart would not listen." "Is there any chance," William asked hesitantly, "that we could start over? Not pretend the past did not happen, but learn from it, and build something new together? I know I am asking for a miracle, but you have already given me so many." Eleanor thought about everything they had been through, the pain and the betrayal and the long years apart. But she also thought about the man she had rediscovered these past weeks, the man who worked until his hands bled to help his tenants, the man who had sacrificed everything to save his sister, the man whose eyes still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Yes," she said, and watched joy transform his face. "But I have conditions. No more secrets between us ever. We face everything together from now on. And you will make me a full partner in managing this estate because I have proven I know what I am doing." William laughed and pulled her into his arms. "Done. All of it. Anything you want. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of your trust." He kissed her then, and Eleanor felt 7 years of hurt begin to heal. It was not magic. It would take time to fully rebuild what had been broken. But they had time now. They had truth and honesty, and a second chance that neither of them would take for granted. 6 months later, they were married in the same chapel where Eleanor had once stood alone. But this time, William was there, waiting for her, with tears in his eyes and love shining on his face. The tenant families filled the pews and cheered when they were pronounced husband and wife. The fields were green again, with healthy crops. The animals were thriving. The estate had been saved, and so had 2 hearts that had almost given up on love. As they walked out of the chapel together into the sunshine, Eleanor realized something important. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are not the ones that go smoothly from beginning to end. Sometimes they are the ones that break and bend and nearly shatter completely. But when two people are willing to fight for each other and forgive and try again, those broken pieces can be put back together into something even stronger than before. She looked at William and saw her future in his eyes, a future filled with hard work and partnership and the kind of love that survives anything. She had come to Asheford Manor expecting to face her worst nightmare. Instead, she had found her way home, and this time, nothing would tear them apart ever again.